Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Tom Wolf, and I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Richard Beal, who is a self described ambassador of recovery in San Francisco. Richard has an incredible story. He's an incredible force for recovery, both in San Francisco and beyond throughout the country. He travels throughout the country giving motivational speaking engagements at national AA and NA meetings. AA, for those of you who don't know, is Alcoholics Anonymous. He's very active in his own recovery still, 27 years on. And he's going to talk to us today about his journey, what recovery means to him, and what we're seeing out in our community today, and some ideas on how to make things better for people out there that are still in the struggle. So, Richard, welcome, and thank you very much for being here.
Hey, thank you, Tom, for the invitation. It's a pleasure, man. Anytime to talk about recovery and reach out to the community, let them know that we do recover.
Yes, we do.
Mhm.
So, Richard, you've been in recovery for, you just had your sober anniversary, 27 years. Is that right?
Yes, 27 years. July 18th, Monday, I made 27 years clean. No slips, no dips, no weekend trips.
Congratulations. That's amazing, man. I
Mhm.
just hit 4 years. I still feel like a baby in recovery. I'm talking to all these people that have been 30 years, 25 years, 27 years. And every time I talk to someone like you, it's just a real tribute and affirmation to me of how recovery can not only save lives, but change lives.
Absolutely. Recovery changed my life, and thank God for the predecessors, the people that were here before me. I don't believe some people, they said that some people believe that some people have to die so that others can live. I don't believe in that. I believe that some people had to live so that I wouldn't die. If they wouldn't have been here, some people like Craig Johnson, Cedric Agbar, other people that, some of my peers, Jesse Prim, even the people that were really working with addicts like Dr. Joe Marshall and the Mega Boys Club and, all the people in recovery that, Posted Mason back in the day, a guy named Bob Berg, he was the treasurer of that meeting for 20 years straight, reached out, a white guy from Hunters Point, old merchant seaman, he ended up being the world service liaison for like 20 years, and he drove the MAP van. I was working at Ozanam. I ended up working at the Ozanam Detox in San Francisco on Howard Street. And he used to drive the MAP van, and all of that. So I just, those back in the day, that's when recovery was real. And recovery was like, I always thought as San Francisco being the gold standard for recovery because of all the programs. It was programs everywhere. If you wanted help, help was available.
And it's not so much that way anymore, is it, with recovery?
Well, a lot of things changed in like 2016, I believe it was, when they put into the RFP that you had to have harm reduction included in your proposal. Otherwise, you was not eligible for funding. And so a lot of programs were not eligible for funding when that came out.
And so those programs ended up folding, right? They shut down in
Yeah,
San
they didn't
Francisco.
have any funding. They couldn't have any funding. So yes, they ended up closing.
And I think that's the irony, and we'll talk more about this later too. But it's ironic because that one of the things that we are severely lacking right now in San Francisco are places for people to go that are struggling with addiction. I know 4 years ago when I was out on the street, if I wanted to go to treatment, I had no idea even where to begin that process in which to do that. And it wasn't until that I got locked up where I actually found some resources on how to go into drug treatment. And that shouldn't be the primary place that you find those resources. Jail, that shouldn't be the primary place. There should be adequate outreach on the street and facilities that you can easily access to start that process.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that. It used to be like that back in the day. I started using drugs at a real early age, I was raised in Richmond, and my father and mother both were, they were using drugs, drug addicts. As far as my father, his drug of choice was marijuana, and my mother, she drank. My father, he was familiar with the streets, and he sold a lot of marijuana, and so I started, smoking his doobies out the ashtray at 9 years old. At 12 years old, I was selling 50-cent joints, $5 matchboxes, and three-finger lids. 12 years old, man. You know what I mean? So I was raised, I never had a job or anything until I got clean. All I ever did was hustle.
Wow.
All I ever did was sell weed and stuff like that, and end up being my best customer. I always say I went from being a baller to a crawler.
So let's talk about that progression. So you started off with weed at a young age, and maybe some drink.
Mhm.
Did it end up manifesting into harder drugs later on?
Absolutely, absolutely. I went from smoking weed, and then I started putting other, chemicals in the weed, like crack and everything when that came out. And then I just said, forget putting my crack in the weed, I'm wasting it. Somebody tell you, but you wasted that. And I just started hitting that pipe. And once I hit the pipe, and the story was over. It was over after that. I ended up smoking crack for the next 10 years and everything else along with it. I went through the heroin phase. I went through the method, smoking, chasing the dragon phase. I went through what we call back in the day space base, where we take the rock and dip it in PCP.
Wow.
And wow, it was just, it was really bad.
Yeah.
At the end.
And
At the
and
end, in the beginning, it was good. At the end, like the end of the road. I was at the end of the road. What it says, either you go on to the bitter ends, jails, institutions of death, or finding a way to live. I was there,
right.
and I
So
tried. I tried just smoking weed. I tried just drinking. I tried everything that you could possibly do. And none of it worked. I tried just going to
yeah.
church. They baptized me. They put enough oil on my forehead to fried chicken. I tried. They dipped me down in the water. I got up and ran to the dope house. You know, I mean, I did everything. Acupuncture, hypnosis. You will not use. You will not use. None of that worked, man. No, serious. All of that type of stuff back in the day. I mean, I even the back in the day, they had the attack therapy was really really heavy back in the day in the beginning, and that just wasn't my thing because I thought I was real tough in Richmond. I was raised around people who considered to be gangsters and stuff. My father ran a gambling house, and I was raised up around guns and violence and stuff like that. So it was like I didn't take well to people calling me names or doing that nose and toes. If y'all don't know what nose and toe, that's when you put your nose and toes against the wall. Sitting on the bench and wearing dunce hats and all that type of stuff didn't work for me. On the hot seat, blasting people, that didn't work for me. You know, I went to my first meeting, 12-step meeting in 1983. I didn't get clean until 1995.
Wow.
So 12 years of going in and out. It took me 12 years to get 30 days. And I'm talking about, I went to 8 different treatment centers and I had 53 detox episodes. And the reason I know is because I ended up working at that detox for 5 years. You
So
know,
so what so what was it, Richard? What was that? Was it like one final straw, or was it just a culmination of things happening in your life where you decided that you were ready to surrender? Did you get, caught up with the law? I mean, what was it that finally, when you went to that meeting in 1995, that you said, "Okay, I'm gonna do this," and then now it's been 27 years.
I mean, it was a combination of a lot of things. That shame, that guilt. My father, he was like my role model for many years, and then I ended up, he never turned me away. Every time I got in trouble, he would get me out of it, and he was just so much shame and so much guilt. And he said, man, he said, he said some things to me that's turned my whole life around. He said stuff to me like, I should have had your mama spit you out. He said stuff to me like, man, you must have came out of the other end because you couldn't have came out of the front end as my son. I mean, he believe. I mean, he said some things to me my first year recovery that just broke me down. And so I left and I went to my little brother. He was 12 years old at that time, and I asked him for some money. And he's 12 years old. He gave me $5. I took that $5 and got on the board with him in San Francisco. Went on my last run. I went on my last run on July for the 2-week run, 4th of July. It was the 4th of July. I went on my last run, man, and I ended up laying in front of the detox, the Azanam detox, man, with a king cobra and an antenna. And and I was 86 out of that detox, and Deborah Williams was working there, and she wasn't supposed to let me in. And she let me in the detox and told me, just lay down. I'm gonna proxy you in. Just lay down. And people really was compassionate. She was really compassionate. If it wasn't for the compassionate women that showed me love no matter what, I wouldn't be here now. And so she laid me down. I stayed in that morning. It was a meeting on Narcotics Anonymous at 10 o'clock at that detox. and it was mats on the floor, and on the other side they put a petition up and they have a meeting on the other side. I went to the meeting on the other side at 10 o'clock, and a guy in there named Roy Washington, he was recruiting people to go to St. Anthony's Foundation, Seton Hall residential program. And I went to 55 Jones Street. I got into the program. They asked me, did I have any felonies? I said no. I had 4 felonies. Of course, I lied,
Of
right?
course.
And so when I completed the primary, I told them the truth. And when I completed the primary, the judge broke the felonies down to misdemeanors. And when I completed the secondary at Covenant House, they dismissed all the cases. And so and I had 1 year clean. And then I went from St. Anthony's programs to Salvation Army Bridgeway Transitional Housing at 242 Turk Street, and now it's the Croc Center.
That's
And
right.
I stayed at Salvation Army for 3.5 years at Bridgeway. And so when I finished that, I had like 4.5 years clean, and then I was working. I've been working in San Francisco. I've been working at the Eisenhower Center for all of that time. And I started doing service at 6 months clean, and I've just been clean ever since. But if it wasn't for St. Anthony's, if it wasn't for Salvation Army, and I look at that too, that St. Vincent de Paul ran the Eisenhower Center. That's no longer there.
Yeah.
St. Anthony's is still there. They got the Father Alpha Center now, but Salvation Army had more programs in. They had the transitional housing. They got a good program there now. The Croc Center is a wonderful program.
Yeah.
And they got the Railton place. But Bridgeway was there at that time. And then you could stay there as long as you want, as long as you paid rent, and you had to go to 2 meetings a week.
I think I think this, that I went through the Salvation Army ARC as
Yeah.
part of from my 6 months of inpatient,
Mhm.
and then from there I got a job at the Croc Center at Railton Place as a case
Oh,
manager, working with chronically homeless folks and homeless veterans and whatnot, and that was a great way for me to kind of I don't know, like not just extend my recovery, but enrich my recovery, because then I'm working with other people that are trying to get back on their feet. And I was just back on my feet, and I was working 2 blocks away from where I used to sleep on the street when I was out there. So even though that was hard, it was also great because then I got to really get back to that community that I had been a part of just, a year prior. So that meant a lot to me. So they do have a lot of good programs, and it's nice to hear that, like, the Father Alfred Center is still out there. They still have the Harbor Light program for Salvation Army is still out there. Are still a few programs out there, but you're right. The whole treatment system, the whole in San Francisco changed, and now it's become a lot more difficult to access treatment for people. A lot of people don't even know the steps that you have to take. You have to have an ID. They have to have your medical history now. They have to assess you. And so it's not like you can just show up in front of a detox center and then they'll let you in. That might happen if you have all your documents and everything that you need ready. But if you don't have all that, you're liable to get turned away nowadays. And that's contributing to the problem.
right. It's a lot of barriers now. Like I said, I laid in front of the door, and I was 86. She wasn't even supposed to let me in, and she let me in. But now, and then they got, medicated assisted treatment. They have numerous things that, drug Medi-Cal now. You can only get so many treatment episodes. And it's been proven that it takes a minimum of 7 treatment episodes to get 1 year clean. And
Yeah.
so if you're only getting a couple of treatment episodes paid for by Medi-Cal, how you go? I mean, the percentage of you staying clean is really low.
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
think I think that's what we're seeing out here today, to compound the bigger problems that we have with homelessness and drug use and illicit fentanyl and meth now being part of the conversation. Whereas, 25 years ago, I mean, I remember going down to the Tenderloin, man. I'd go down to Turk and Leavenworth, man. I'd drive through there and there'd be 100 guys out there on the corner, 150 guys out there on the corner. Some of them slinging, a lot of them just hanging out and everything. The drug of choice back then was, crack and the drink and weed. I think we all know this. Over the last 6-7 years, you've seen this kind of influx with illicit fentanyl and with crystal meth, and it seems to have kind of complicated the issue of not just more people dying on the street, but reaching people, reaching people in their time of need. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we face right now.
absolutely, I agree. And then you add the epidemic as far as COVID and everything to it. A lot of people were being found dead inside their SRO or wherever they were living. too. Not only the ones on the street, but people that were living inside, because they were isolated. They didn't have the opportunity to receive some Norcan or something like that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's better, you have an opportunity if you use it on the street to get some help than you do inside of somewhere else. So it's positive and negatives to all of that.
Yeah.
I truly believe that we need to meet people where they are, but we do a disservice if we just leave them there.
Right.
You know, I do believe that it should be mandated treatment. I mean, people need to be mandated. If I wasn't told that, you know what, if you stay here, you'll have the opportunity to have those court cases dropped. All of that type of stuff it motivated me. It motivated me. And then all the things that they set out to do, once the drugs cleared away, I had I could see life better,
Yeah.
and I was started listening to some of the people that were really trying to help me, you know.
So let's talk about that for a minute, the whole concept of mandated treatment, because it gets it gets twisted up out there in the media and by activists and whatnot. They talk about it being carceral, and that you're basically criminalizing people with addiction by forcing them into drug treatment. And my position's always been that there's a subset of people on the street that require some kind of intervention, especially those that are struggling with like health problems. Like there's a guy out there that I know that's got necrosis on his legs right now, and he's a meth and crack and fentanyl addict too. And necrosis means that your legs are literally rotting off your body, and nobody wants to intervene and help him. And so he's just going to sit out there, and he is going to die because we refuse to intervene. Whereas hospitalization followed by mandated treatment might give that guy a chance. Can you talk a little bit about why you think mandated treatment is an answer for those people out there that we need to intervene on?
Well, I always say that I wasn't, arrested. I was rescued many times by the police, and I think that if I would have kept on running, I probably would have died because I didn't know how to stop. They stopped me a few times, and really now looking back on it, I'm grateful. And so I think that mandated treatment has been really successful when it comes to helping people recover and become responsible, productive members of society once again. It gives people hope because you got a chance to connect to people that came from the same place that you came from. And really, when I look at, I don't see the same thing that a lot of people see coming from where I came from when I see people selling drugs on the street corner. Because I understand too, I never, like I said, I never had a job until I got clean. All I knew was hustling. And people can only do what they know. You know what I'm saying? And so that might be the only thing that they know how to do. But we got to give them, if you can sell dope, you can sell a car. If you can run a game, you can run a business.
Yeah.
We need to let them know that you got transferable skills and not demean people and put people down, but say, hey man, what you're doing is not working. And what's going to happen to you is the same thing that happened to everybody else that go down that path is jails, institutions, and death.
Right.
And so you got an opportunity. We're going to give you an opportunity to help yourself and become a responsible, productive member of society. And sometimes they can hear that. And sometimes the only time a person get clean and get clear-headed is when they're incarcerated, unfortunately. But that's really fortunate for them. I know it was fortunate for me. I finally, was able to listen. Even though I went back out there, I remember it was implanted into my brain that guess what? Maybe if I can get a few days clean, I can possibly have a better quality of life.
Yeah. And the same thing for me too. It was those 3 months that I spent in San Bruno out in county jail that gave me that moment of clarity that I needed to kind of reflect, to realize that, damn, I really have lost everything. I have no control over anything in my life anymore. And I'm ready. I'm ready now to give recovery an honest try. And it was a life-changing experience. And do I ever want to go back and do it again? No. Do I ever want to go back to jail? No. Do I ever want to go use again? Absolutely not. Because I haven't forgotten. Nobody likes to make those spreads in jail with the top ramen and the nacho cheese and the Cheetos. I call them jail chips, but the flaming hot Cheetos, that you crush up and put in there.
Right.
That ain't no kind of life, man. It's no kind of life to live. So okay, so now you're not just in recovery, but you're an undercover ambassador for recovery in San Francisco and beyond. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now in recovery, and also tell me about how recovery has changed your life.
Oh man, my life is amazing today because of recovery. Right now I do work for Tenderloin Housing Clinic. I'm director of transitional housing. The program is funded by Adult Probation Department in San Francisco, and I have the opportunity to work with people coming out of the criminal justice system, and just introduce them to a new way of life. I also do a lot of 12-step work. I also do a lot of some work with a support group, and I'm a mentor, I'm a sponsor, I've been doing service. I truly believe that my job is not my recovery, even though I help a lot of people into recovery from my job. But I want to do something free. It was freely given to me, and so I want to freely give it to others. And so I do a lot of 12-step work. I do a lot of service. Even at 20, somebody was there for me, the secretary meetings, to open up the meeting place, to introduce me to 12-step literature, to say, when you leave the program, run to a 12-step meeting or go to some place or support group where you can continue your recovery. Because your recovery don't end, at the end when they give you that certificate and say all of a sudden, a lot of people get lost, where they overestimate their recovery and underestimate the disease of addiction. They think because they done got a few days clean or whatever, that, the disease of addiction became a punk and you got the disease beat and all that type of stuff. I never think that I got the disease beat. With 27 years clean, I'm still scared of dope. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I mean, when people, I see people, I walk to the T every day, seeing people using everything, and I know I don't want to use, but I look at it and it reminds me, lets me know that the coast ain't clear, but the message is that any addict can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And for the first 18 months of my recovery, I wanted to use every day, but I didn't. I just didn't use. I just didn't take anything. And then one day I woke up and the desire to use was gone. But it wasn't easy. It took some work.
Now, do you attribute that losing that desire to use to the steps, or did you have like a spiritual awakening, or was it just kind of all of those things kind of put together, or you just had enough?
I mean, it's always, to me, it's a combination of all that. But recovery is not an exact science, and church might work for somebody. Something it's different. That's why I believe in multiple modalities. That's what worked for me might not exactly work for you, but you need to find out what works for you. Some people do need a Christian-based program. Some people do need a 12-step program. Some people do need a support group. Some people do need to have that therapeutic community where they can get friended on their behavior.
Yeah.
Some people need that, that a more nurturing type of structure. And
Yeah.
so recovery is not an exact science. It's not like math. 2 and 2 is going to always be 4, but you don't know what's going to work for one person and work for another. That's why we have individual service plan. That's why we do wraparound services and assessments with people to identify what they need. You know what I'm saying? And instead of just putting somebody in a program saying this will, stay there, and that's not the modality that's going to work for them.
Right.
You know, and it's just like you don't have the opportunity now to go to any because the funding is not there. A lot of programs have closed, and like I said, you used to be people, man. Like Dr. David Smith, Dr. Daryl Naba, Dr. Diana Modia, Dr. Greg Hayner, other people, icons in recovery that was around. It was just even with Cecil Williams, he's now retired. His wife just passed away, and so it was just like it was just like it was really different. It was a whole lot of icons. It's a few still around. Some of my peers like Craig and Cedric, love them to death, and it's some people that still have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's not the same. All of those programs, and a lot happened when the merger with Haight Ashbury Free Clinics and Walton House merged and became Health Right 360. At that time I was working for Haight Ashbury Free Clinics, and they just laid off everybody, eliminating my position, and now I guess now Health Right 360 oversees Asian American program. A lot of programs are under their structure now,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is it changed the modality. There used to be a lot of programs, for like Western District Recovery House, Center for Recovery, Smith House, Smith Ryan, Jelani House for Men. I mean, all of those programs are closed.
That's really sad. I visited the ARA out in the Haight the other
Right there on Haight
a few
Street.
weeks
Yeah,
ago,
ARA
and
House.
they're still around, but they're
Mhm.
struggling. They're struggling to stay afloat. You know, I mean, the pandemic has something to do with that, but they're struggling to stay afloat because it's harder for them to find people that are going to donate to their programs, because they're still walking that kind of line of 12-step abstinence, giving people that want to choose that lifestyle a place to live, and you know, it looks like I might even try to help them fundraise a little bit so that their program can keep going because they've been around for 55 years, and they're one of the last places like that left in San Francisco that I'm aware of that still kind of promote that 12-step modality for for those in recovery that have taken that route. We need every single kind of treatment modality, every single program that we can think of, from faith-based abstinence all the way to harm reduction, to be included in that space. But there seems to be an unwillingness to include kind of these more traditional programs that you and I kind of came through that saved our lives. I mean, we're here
Right.
talking today because those programs saved our lives. They showed us a different way to live, a different lifestyle that we could choose. And abstinence-based folks, everybody, we all want to save people's lives. We don't want people dying of overdose. We don't want people dying from drug addiction, but we want to change lives too. And I think that that message has been lost a little bit.
Absolutely. You know, they need to have more options, and they need to have longer treatment stays, you know, longer periods of treatment, you know, because if they just fund it for 90 days, 90 days to me is not really enough. It's just long enough to really get your head clear. You know, you need long-term, they need to have the option for long-term treatment. Now, if somebody just wants to stay 90 days as far as they're familiar with recovery, they know about recovery, their level of functioning is high enough for them to be able to build up a support network and stay clean, then that's different. They already have been introduced to the, you know, pathway to recovery. But somebody who is really acute and has real severe mental health and substance abuse issues, it's going to be a struggle for them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Their baseline is different, you know, and so you can't, there's no one thing that's going to work for somebody who has a low baseline. And the best thing that you might get them to do is get up and take care of their hygiene and eat every day. That might be the best thing you can do with them.
Yeah.
They might not be able to become employable again, but you need to be able to meet them where they are and then try to improve the quality of their life. And you
Yeah.
can't do that if you got all these barriers in front of them, you know, and obstacles in front of them, and all kinds of eligibility requirements. And you can't get in here without this test. You can't get in here without this assessment. You can't. Oh, you ain't got no ID. Man, I didn't have no ID. You don't even want to carry ID. Well, you ain't thinking about no ID when you're out there using dope.
Not,
I gave my brother's
not
name.
only
I don't know how
that,
many times
I,
I gave my brother's name. I got 5 brothers.
yeah, I did that before too, and I had my ID stolen. I think the first month that I was out on the street,
Yeah,
so I had to walk around with my jail wristband as my only form of ID that I had. Man, that wasn't really working
right,
out too good, you
right.
know.
I rarely gave my real name. You know what I mean? And so I mean, it is hard to trust people when you're coming off of drugs because you don't trust anybody.
Yeah,
You know, and so I understand that. That's why the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. And I'm not saying that a therapist or a clinician or anybody else can help use an addict. I'm saying that the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel because you can relate emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, you know,
yeah,
and physically. I mean, you ain't never been dope sick before. You don't even understand. I've been dope sick. You know what I'm saying? And so you know what I'm talking about.
hmm,
Somebody you tell you they'll listen to you and say, "Oh yeah, they're not hurt, but you can do this, you can do that." They can talk about methadone or Suboxone or whatever they got out there. But man, when you dope sick, you don't even try to hear nothing. You ain't trying to hear all of that type of stuff.
being dope sick and driving in your car, sneaking out your house at 2 in the morning and driving your car to the Tenderloin to score some heroin. That's something that I'll never forget. I'll never forget that feeling. You know,
Right.
crashing into the guardrail at the 9th Street exit off of 101, trying to get down to the Tenderloin because I needed my dope so bad. Um, I'll never forget that, and that's something that not, you know, if you don't know, you don't know.
You don't know, you
You
don't
don't know.
know.
That's right. So, Richard, we have this overdose crisis, man. We had 53 people again. 53 more people died in June in San Francisco from drug overdose. 60% of those people were homeless on the street. What 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 do we got to do, man?
We need
What's the
more.
solution?
I mean, I like that they do have the hot team. They got mobile crisis. They got some things that are good. I truly believe that, we need more clinicians out there on the street. We need more recovery programs. We need to outreach where the problem is. And even though we need to even offer the people that are in jail once we arrest them to let them know that, you know what, this is some change for you. This is some things. And then another thing is that a lot of times our 5150 people are call a hotline or and have them come picked up, and they might go to San Francisco General, but they let them out the same day without even providing adequate treatment. And I just think that is a really a disservice. Like somebody who is obviously suffering from severe mental health, substance abuse and stuff, and you're just going to let them out without doing anything, without even offering. I mean, and they don't have the ability to make a good cognitive decision for themselves. So they need somebody to make some decisions for them if they've been 5150. Why we just let them out in 2 hours, an hour or two, they right back out.
Yeah.
And that is just terrible. So it has to be something different that we're doing for the people that are out there suffering with severe mental health issues. Some of them are drug related, some of them have become organic because of the continuous drug use. If you smoke meth long enough, your brain is going to be fried. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just like we need to be able to provide better services for the people that are suffering from substance abuse, mental health, and that chronic homelessness.
Yeah.
And so instead of just, putting them into the system and just letting them right out without providing adequate service.
Yeah. That's great. I agree
It needs
100%.
to be a continuum of care.
Right.
And the continuum of care has been dropped. I mean, even when people complete my program or other programs with APD and other departments, that the bridge is not even there to go into permanent housing. I mean, it's a few private organizations that I have relationships with, but as far as a bridge to the Department of Homeless and Supportive Housing, directly from another city department as APD, where we can move people. And I hear all the time, and I know for a fact that it's 600 empty SROs every day. So why we got 600 empty units, and we got all these people on the street that need housing, and people coming out of treatment that have been compliant, been willing to go through residential treatment, been willing to do transitional housing, and they don't have a place to go. I struggle. My people struggle. Case managers struggle to get them connected to permanent housing. Why?
I
Where's the
agree. Why?
bridge?
I don't know where the bridge is. I mean, the SFHSH, I think I think they're overwhelmed, to be quite frank. Coordinated entry, I think, is overwhelmed getting
Mm-hmm.
people signed up for housing because the interest is great. But you bring up a good point about we got 600 empty SROs. We also have, the DPH lists all their sanctioned treatment beds on a website. They have 75 open beds right now.
Mm-hmm.
Two, plus all the private programs like Father Alfred, Salvation Army, they have beds open too.
Mm-hmm.
All those beds should be filled, but
All
we
of them.
but we don't have that continuum of care to get people into those beds. And the way I see it is that the previous infrastructure that we had, that we used to use a lot, unfortunately, was county jail to get people off into treatment, and we've taken that out of the equation, and we just referred everybody to like pretrial diversion, all that stuff. And while that might work for some people, a lot of people just end up going right back out on the street. So that that breakdown that you talked about in the hospital is also breaking down with social services and at the criminal justice level, and that's something that everybody needs to work on. But I think that we may be turning a corner a little bit in San Francisco because there's been some changes recently, and I think that there's a recognition. The mayor did a big interview yesterday. It was on the news on NBC, talking
Yes.
about the need for some intervention for people on the street. And so that kind of talk, that kind of rhetoric is positive because there's a recognition from our elected leaders that are responsible for spending that $13 billion annual budget in San Francisco that we need to shore up these continuums of care for people. So I hope that bears fruit. I really, really do, because it breaks my heart, man, when I hear 53 more people have died. Um, despite all the money that we're spending on all these services out there, and the deaths are actually going up and not down.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, a disease of addiction, it crosses all barriers when it comes to ethnicity, even though the people of color are suffering more than any other population. but it crosses all barriers. The poverty bitten the line, the racial line, all of that. Everybody suffers when it comes to the disease of addiction. And so, in response to that, I know the mayor had declared that state of emergency in the Tenderloin. Immediately, one of the things I did, I believe, like, that's why some people call me the recovery ambassador, because immediately I said, okay, let's do a recovery rally. So we did the recovery rally, as a response to the state of emergency at Bodecker Park.
Hmm.
And that was really successful. And now, we brought back Recovery Day, last year, in August, and we're going to have it again on August the 26th. You participated last year. Looking forward to you participating this year.
I will be there.
And yeah, and so, we got a voice. I mean, we need to use our voice. We can't, you can't take away the opportunity also for even the opposition, or I want to hear from everybody. What is your point of view? We can have a discussion and we can talk about what works and what doesn't work and what has not been working and why can't we change? And some of the things that, we see as far as, the linkage center and, and safe injection sites and all of that type of stuff is just, to me, it hasn't been effective. It's not working. And when you see that it's not working, and really, to me, it appears to be a supporting codependent to an addict. Because I think if I had a place to go shoot dope and smoke crack and everything else, I know I wouldn't have got clean.
But
So that's,
I,
to me, we that's not the answer. To me,
yeah,
the answer, and then the other answer to me is that you can't get people off dope by giving them more dope.
right.
I mean,
That never works. Not
you
long
know
term.
what I'm saying?
It might be a short term fix, but it doesn't fix the problem long term. And safe consumption sites. I've become kind of ambivalent about it. Like, well, they're probably going to do it anyway, so I'd rather someone be able to shoot dope there than in an alleyway, I guess. But in the big picture, is it really going to save lives in the big picture? Maybe right there on the spot it will, but big picture wise, that's not what's going to save lives. What's going to save lives is recovery. That's what not just saves lives, but it changes lives. And that's what we need to promote more in the city. We need to empower the we need really empower the idea of recovery in San Francisco.
And when I say about meeting people where they're at too, is that even with the safe injection sites at the Lincoln Center, how many people are actually being linked on the pathway to recovery? How many people are actually being, saying, okay, man, you done took a hit. You can't talk to nobody after they took it, because the first thing they're thinking
No.
about is taking another one.
I think
What I mean?
I think the
And
stat
so
was
that's
1.4% or something like that
yeah,
were linked to
right. And
recovery.
so, don't nobody want to hear about you messing up my high. If I'm getting high, that's not a good time to talk to somebody about getting clean. I mean, even at a 12-step meeting, they say a lot of them, they say, if you had used today, please listen and talk to someone after the meeting. I mean, come on. If the last time you want to talk to somebody, man, is when you get high, man, you messing up my high. You know what I'm saying?
I used to go to meetings out at 3120 Mission out there and on 24th Street. And there's this guy, this OG named Jesus, that would go out and bring guys that were drunk into the meetings all the time, man. And he brought this guy into the meeting with his bottle of vodka in his hand still, right?
Hmm.
Sat him down at the meeting. He's sitting there with his bottle out of it, knocks over his bottle, vodka spills everywhere in a room full of alcoholics, man, that are in recovery. And we're all just looking at him. And pretty soon the guy kind of comes to and looks around and he says, "Where am I?" And the
Hmm.
guy had dragged him into a meeting. But I appreciate the fact that he's making that effort to bring people in, to show them another way, to even just plant that little tiny seed in their head that, maybe you do have a problem. So last question I want to ask you, Richard, if I can, man. Um, what do you want to say to people out there that are struggling with addiction right now? What would you say to them?
I say that's a better way to live. I say that we do recover. I said change is not hard, it's the resistance to change that makes change hard. And that was when somebody told me that, I said, what? He said, change is not hard. It's the resistance to change that makes change hard. You got to embrace change. And that was big for me. That when he told me that I could change, it gave me some hope. It gave me some hope because I was hopeless. And it gave me some hope when they said, you can change. You don't have to continue to live that way. You can develop, you got some skills, you're pretty intelligent, you've always been able to hustle on the street. Use those skills to improve the quality of your life, man. And even for the people, identify what your issues are. And you can improve your life, man. Even going from being on the street to just getting a place and be able to be self-sustaining. That's an improvement. You know, you don't have to use drugs. You know what I'm saying? And I always say, the people say keep coming back. I always say stick and stay. It's bound to pay. Face it, trace it, and erase it.
Love
Feel,
it.
deal, and heal. I tell people all the time, man. Hey, it's only 2 rules when it comes to recovery. Rule number 1, don't take nothing. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1.